One day we'll put this out. I swear it.
The most challenging character was actually releasing the things we've been recording.
I mean, by the time you may be listening to this, we may both be dead and gone. I don't know.
This is the artifact that survives the death of our civilization. And
Yes.
people of the future are very confused.
Yeah, for sure. Hi there, welcome back to the John T. Mantis. This is a podcast where we have creative questions for curious gamers. And my name is Matt or Maddie or Hugh. I haven't decided yet. It's one of those. And with me, as always, is my beautiful co-host, Jesse. Jesse, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How you doing, Matt?
Very, very well. Thank you for asking. I want to kick off this episode with a creative question about challenging characters. This is something that I think we've kind of, pushed back and forth in our private chats. And I think that you and I spend a lot of time being game master. And in certain scenarios, we do find ourselves on the player side. Rarely do we ever find ourselves, typically in the past, on that side together. And
when we do, God help whoever's running it.
That's true. That's true. So I thought, why not address this topic of challenging characters and what is a challenging character and why do we need to talk about it? So if you don't mind, I'd like to kick off by saying what I view to be a challenging character, or maybe we should start with what is not a challenging character, I guess. So, I don't want to throw any shade on anybody. If you're someone who, you've modeled your character after a certain character in a show or movie or book or comic or whatever, you're doing it right. Keep on doing what you're doing. But what do we consider to be a non-challenging character as far as a player is concerned?
One of the things I'd throw right out there is, coming out the gate with a hot take is a tragic backstory.
Mm-hmm.
A la Batman, like a backstory, I guess a backstory that leaves you to risk not a lot. And admittedly, one of the guys I think you're going to talk about tonight just found out last night has an incredibly tragic backstory. And I'm not talking about that one, but I'm talking about like, I had a family, they were all murdered, and now I'm on a quest for vengeance. So like, okay, you want revenge in a game where 90% of the rules are about fighting, and there's no hook now for the DM to make that story matter to your present character anyway, other than just put your list of villains in front of you. I think there's nothing wrong with that. That's fun to play. I know I've played that kind of character, but I don't necessarily think that is a challenge because there's not a lot of actual stakes.
Yeah, I think in that regard, I think I'm a little bit more lenient on it than most people would be, because I feel like that's kind of a rite of passage when you're playing role-playing games. I think if you haven't made a character with that backstory specifically, I think you should. I think everybody should explore that, and I think you should do it and get it out of your system and then grow beyond it. So I'm a lot more lenient for it. Like, if this is your first time, that's fine. But if you tend to make characters with that same or maybe slight variations on it or whatever the case may be, but if I could give you a little bit of pushback, like don't most stories in our modern culture involve like that kind of tragic element? It's very easy to understand. I mean, like if you take like a Marvel movie like the Guardians of the Galaxy, like Star-Lord's mom dies, but she dies from cancer, so he doesn't have anybody to take revenge upon. So it's nuanced in a little bit in that fashion, and then it gets a little bit more nuanced, and then he gets taken away from his planet. but it's not like a complicated, that's not a complicated character in my opinion. It's made to appeal to a wide audience, and I think that when we play role playing games, we replicate what we understand in modern storytelling. So
Yeah,
what
and
Mhm.
again, like I said, absolutely nothing wrong with that, but is that per se a challenge? Is
Mhm.
that a stretch for you, inhabiting this character or coming up with that story to
Mhm.
say, like, I have this grief in my background, and my grief describes some of the ways that I act as a character. Um, I don't know. I mean, maybe on the other hand, it is a challenge because actually my parents have never been murdered
Mhm.
in an alley,
Yeah.
but the way you lean into it is you just gravelly voice talk and then like swear to me,
Yeah.
and then I don't
Yeah, you
know.
tell somebody, you're not wearing hockey pads, that's why, right?
Yeah,
So, yeah, I think it's difficult for the average person to imagine what a tragic origin story would be. I mean, I don't want to marginalize anybody's pain in the world, but I think for the vast majority of us, like our pain is very private and personal and wrapped up in our complex human relationships. And I think when you get to the D&D table or any gaming table, you kind of just want to be like, you know what, I just want something simple and straightforward, like my parents were killed. Like that's just easier for everybody to understand. And I don't want my tragic backstory to be that, like, my father has been slowly feeding my mother poison for the last 10 years and it finally worked. And you know what I mean? Like that just, it's like we want to roll dice and kill orcs, right?
right.
So yeah, I agree with you. Like I don't really have a problem with it, So if we've identified that kind of as like the stereotypical non-challenging character, then what is an example of a challenging character, like the mid, like if we have low, mid, and high, what is the middle mark for a challenging character? Somebody with just enough to for a DM to work with, but not simple and straightforward.
Well, I think again, I go right out the gate with the Batman example. And I think one of the things about the Batman in this is one of the things, just seeing Robert Pattinson in that role, is it just occurred to me, and this is slightly embarrassing. It occurred to me for the first time watching that movie of, oh, the Batman is not well.
Mm,
Like somehow, maybe just he's been a pop culture phenomenon in
yeah.
my lifetime. It never occurred to me, oh, this guy is really messed up. I
Really?
mean, like he's really, really messed up. Like he's listening to drone core versions of Nirvana songs while he draws on the floor with an X-Acto knife. So that level, like
Hmm.
having that level of the tragedy, I think could be a challenge, because that is not, I mean, that's almost like asking, like, welcome to your D&D game. I would like you to now become a method actor. Like,
Yeah. Well, that's I mean, my very first experiences with role playing games was with people who were theater majors. So I could see them exploring that kind of material. Batman always seemed exceptionally unhinged to me, even going as far back as the more tamer versions of that we know the character in, because I always thought it was interesting that this guy, his parents got murdered when he was a kid, and nobody questions why he keeps like grabbing children, putting them in costumes and making them fight crime with them. And it's like because he's really fucked up and he's trying to replicate a family structure, and this is like, so damage and mental damage then in that capacity, I guess, is that what makes complex a complex or challenging character? Does it have to be wrought with tragedy?
I think, okay, so we're talking about emotional, and I'm gonna say that this is the same thing with mechanics on the other end of the challenge. Okay, so we've had the emotional depth and the mechanics. I'm gonna try and draw a line between them. So follow me with it. In the first example of, I have a tragic past, my parents were killed, and now I'm on a background for vengeance, that costs you as a character, in the hands of most DMs, that costs you nothing. No stretch is required to make. You're like, you see the guy that killed your parents, I kill him. Like that's not a stretch, right? To me, that's not a challenging character. And again, like we probably, I'll try to make this the last time I say this. You do not have to play a challenging character.
Mhm.
Like, and if you don't, there's nothing wrong with not playing a challenging character. But if you do, it's one of those things where I think if you have on the emotional end, those emotions should create a hindrance for you. You should lean into them in ways that make it hard for you to achieve your player goals or even your character goals because of that. That is where I think the challenge starts, is
Mhm.
to throw out little story nuggets that don't optimize a situation for you.
Right. I think maybe at that point, isn't it the DM's responsibility or the game master's responsibility to challenge it up a little bit or make it a little bit more complicated, do you think?
I think it works best when it's like, I don't think you should, if you want it to really be a stretch, I think you're going to have to insert it into the into the game yourself, because the GM is managing how many other people, all the NPCs in the world.
Mhm.
Nothing wrong with having that conversation of, hey, I would like this aspect of my backstory to create some complications for me in the next session or two. Can we talk about how to do that? But
Mhm.
just like default, assuming that your game master is going to be able to hit that a lot or bring it to the fore and allow you to just respond, I think is not a great way to lean into that challenge.
Mhm.
And then conversely, the same thing mechanics with suboptimal characters, where the mechanics themselves hinder you from always being successful,
Right.
um, or lessen your chance of success.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that's the two things. To me, the challenge is when you lean into the unknown of what can happen to your character because of who they are, and you let that unknown happen even when it makes things hard or perilous for your character.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean I agree with all that. I think in my opinion, if I at my table, if somebody brought, a character with the backstory we're talking about, the Batman backstory, I think I'd just be so happy that somebody actually did the work, even if it was just to use this background from Batman. I think we're spoiled. Our current group that we're both in, like, people rise to the occasion and want to do interesting little quirky storylines or backstories or whatever the case. So I think we're hashtag blessed in that regard. But in the past, it's like I've been like, hey, I really want to run this game. Everybody's on board, and Jesse's the only one that gives me a backstory. Everybody else is like, oh, I forgot to do it, or I ran out of time, or I wrote something I didn't like it. So I feel like if somebody gives me the Batman backstory, I'm like, okay, cool. I just need to do some tweaks on this. Like, let's have it eventually turn out that the people who murdered their parents did so because their parents were actually terrible people and they had no idea. you know, and I don't know if that's right or wrong. Maybe that's kind of a dick move on my part, but you didn't really give me much to work with, and I'm just happy you did it. So I think in that regard, I think there's room for improvement for sure.
I think there's another time, going back to what you're saying about our gaming group being hashtag blessed. Um, there's another kind of challenge as well that I think has to do with not knowing everybody in your gaming group really well. Like, I feel like the challenge mode goes up when you don't really know, like when it's a new group getting together for the first time, or like if you're in a situation where you have to play with like a group that meets up at the friendly local game store, like because there's nobody's willing to let these weirdos they don't know into their house.
Sure.
um like, yeah, I think in those situations there's also challenge as well. One of the things that we suggested this topic and kind of planned for it, and then I was like, but I'm not really, I feel utterly safe to do anything I want to do with my character and like every gaming group I play with. And then I had a moment with, I'm like, am I just an asshole then? Like, am I?
I mean, I feel like without going into too much, right? I feel like your current character in one of our games, the our 5e game, I think that character is a challenging character. And
Yeah,
I think it's a challenging character for you. And I think it's a character I would steer clear of. So why don't you give us a little rough overview of that character?
sure. Berdine Cleargrain is basically so I have, y'all, if you play for a while, you have your character type you tend to lean into.
Hmm.
I go through phases. I think my main go-to has always been the bard or the face or the social character. And I'm still kind of that in this one, but my tweak is I'm bad at it. I just smile a lot and use really big words the character doesn't really understand.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, my challenge on this one is like I never play a human fighters. I'm like human fighters are basic and dumb. If there is a monster species, and that's my opinion. Yeah, okay, I'm not going to apologize anymore. Uh, if there is an inhuman species, that's the stretch I want to make. What is like to be something reviled, something inhuman,
Hmm.
something that doesn't think in a human way, something monstrous, something savage, or just a really charming guy. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what I'm used to is that you've played some of the most creative characters I've ever seen anybody play in a role playing game. And so for you to take on, um, a human fighter with, I think, the stylings of like Mad Mardigan from
Oh
the
yeah, that's
movie Willow.
100% deliberate.
Right, right. And that's why I think it's a challenging character for you because I think for a lot of people, human fighter stylized after Mad Mardigan, they're like, all right, now I got it. Like that's a great idea. Like I could really do that. And they should. Like I think if that's your character concept, go with it. I'd love to see where that goes. But for somebody like you, like you're used to being like what like how far can I take this? You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna play this dragonborn druid called the Branch Creeper, who takes everything like super literal outside of the context of animals, but not in like a Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy way, like in a different, totally different way. And there's this unhinged side to his like animalistic savage nature, like he's a part of nature. He's not like most people play druids in the fact that they are like the caretakers or warders of nature, and your character is like a savage aspect of nature in themselves. And so I think a lot of people would shy away from doing the things that you've done in games with certain characters, especially in the way that you and I met, where you played a lizard man, who you know what I mean,
Oh,
around a
Sar.
around a table of strangers, like you're making like Jurassic Park style dinosaur calls. As one of the characters in the group got kidnapped, and to sound the alarm, you at a full table full of people you don't really even know, with the exception of a couple of people. And this is how Jesse and I met. He's making dinosaur calls at the table, and I think that's a challenging character. Like vulnerability is challenging, and one of the things I like about role playing games and Dungeons and Dragons in particular, since that's what I have the most amount of experience playing, is that you really have to be vulnerable in order to make role playing games work well. You sit around a table with people and you subscribe to this idea that you're all adults using your imagination, and then you kind of have to like do voices and say and do things that you wouldn't normally do in your life, and everybody's got to kind of be on par with it. So I think that's what a challenging character is for most people. And I don't want to say that comes super easy to you, because I think you do a lot of work to delve into that idea. But I think that this is your current character in that 5e game is one of your more challenging characters, because you really have to pick your moments with that character. You know what I mean? Like you're used to having the spotlight on you, and you're having to kind of just wait for your moment and then hit it, you know?
Yep.
Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Are my
Yeah. It's
compliments of you accurate?
yeah, no. Yeah, he's not gonna go in to lead every negotiation and like some of the behaviors, because I've been doing this for a while and I'm keyed into it being a group experience is I try and read social cues and be good at turn taking at the table and try and do things to get other characters involved in the scene. And when you're doing that as the face, you just ask somebody a question in character. When you're doing it as the fighter, whose really only concern is that people know that he's the best fighter in the land and that people know he's handsome and charming when he's actually probably neither. like,
Mm-hmm.
um, so that's a variation from Mad Mardigan, who is
Mm-hmm.
handsome and actually charming. But yeah, yeah, it's hard. And but that was the deliberate stretch of like, how do I get out of my comfort zone in Dungeons and Dragons? And it's by playing a human fighter, which I just find hilarious. Like,
Yeah, for sure. I think that kind of goes back to, your comfort level as far as what a challenging character is concerned. I think this goes back to the tragic backstory, the Batman origin story. For me, I think a super challenging, the ultimate challenging character would be to invoke the tragedy elements of my own personal life, being somebody who suffers horrendously from depression. That doesn't translate well into the gaming table. Like, our actual tragedy does not translate well into the gaming experience because A, it's supposed to be fun. B, we're supposed to be like, exiting reality for a second and through an escape mechanism, a shared experience. And then C, it's like people don't want to air their own dirty laundry, and I don't blame them. Just so.
I sort of come at that from a different perspective too, and I think this informs what I think of a challenging character is like, I went to a theater magnet high school, and my first attempt at college, I was studying theater. So I was a very much a theater kid and like read Stanislavski and like read The Method and all this stuff, and sort of had this idea that I came from playing characters on stage of just like every aspect of that feeling that I'm bringing to the character is a part of myself.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm just exploring. And that also was reinforced by my early teenage gaming experiences. I started with D&D when I was like 12, but by the time I was like 16, I was playing in a vampire LARP. And that really sort of like, what is this, these darker sides, your dirty laundry? That game is designed, unlike D&D, to like, no, that's the fun. Let's air our dirty laundry.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get into even more extreme versions of that, like pathos driven game from White Wolf, like Wraith the Oblivion, which God, I would love to actually play that someday. I've owned a couple different incarnations of the rule set. I have the newest 20th anniversary edition and a massive tome on my bookshelf. I've read it, and it's just like finding the group that's like, hey, so I know for the last couple years we've been making, witty one-liners and, fighting monsters and saving the day. But how would you feel about a deep meditative experience on death, loss, and grieving?
My favorite things.
I know, right? And I will say this, like just as a little aside from right before you returned to the group, we had a player drop, and Kurt had Alice is Missing, which is the game played only by text. And I will freely admit, sorry guys, if you do listen to this will probably be buried mid-season, so you will have been given up listening to be supportive and probably missed this. But I was hesitant that a bunch of white dudes in their 40s could play a pathos-driven game about a missing girl and all that entails and what we know of society today. That like a missing teenage girl with all that implies.
Mm-hmm.
And my God, they surprised me. And I'm like, I could actually play Wraith with these dudes.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they brought it out. Like, and those were challenging characters as well, because God, I don't remember how to be a teenager. Like, it's been a minute.
Yeah. I mean, I still have nightmares where I'm back in high school, but those are always in my current 40-year-old form. Like, I have these horrible repeating nightmares where I get sent back to high school, and they're like, yeah, you fucked up and you didn't do something right and you didn't graduate. And the first thing I say is like, why are you sticking me back in high school with a bunch of kids? Like, there isn't a test I could take. There's a there's a class I could attend. Like, no, you have to replicate this painful, horrible experience that you were convinced was going to be the downfall of your identity. You got to do it all over again. But this time it's worse. This time you're a 40-year-old man surrounded by teenagers.
You have no peers.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I hope for you next time you have that dream, like right as it starts, there's a record scratch. You look directly at the mental camera and go, "You're probably wondering how I got here."
now that I would watch. Yeah,
That'd be
for
great.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for what I consider to be a challenging character,
Yeah, let's
is
hear about someone you've jumped into again.
the ultimate challenging character I had, which was a complete failure of playing a character, is my eyes were definitely way bigger than my stomach. I think we were playing. I think the game is called Godbound. It's a
Yes, by Kevin Crawford from Sign Nominate Publishing.
it's a great game. I can't. I only played it very briefly, but the the way this game is organized, and the way that it plays out is very elegant, considering what's happening in the game. So you take on these personas of these demigods or gods or like exalted power level creatures in a world filled with normal humans and fantastical creatures and whatnot, you know and you play like a group of gods essentially, or a group of deities ascending in power. And a lot of the people in the group went with what you would think of as your typical godlike characters, using archetypes or characterizations from story and culture. And for some reason I got it in my head that like I would create like a reanimated like machine animal spirit from a martyred human, that like all these pieces had gotten sewn together, and then it had become this like multi-personality creature. And like right after I created it, I should have realized what it was and said, guys, I need to bow out of this first session and try again. But I really tried to make it work, and it just did not fit. It was like the concept I thought was cool of being like a Frankenstein like character, but there was just so many creative elements that I tried to throw into the mix that I ended up like overwhelming myself, and the character was too challenging. I didn't even know how to have him like interact with anybody, because I was like too far in my own head about it. It's like I didn't even understand what this character was, and I should have scrapped him, but I thought it would be, I was like, this is going to be a real challenge to play, is probably what I thought. And I couldn't even get him out of the beginning stages of beginning to figure out who that character is. Have you
Well,
ever had a character like that?
Um, probably, but it's probably been in a campaign that like lasted like 2 sessions or something.
Mhm.
I've had, and I do want to, sorry, before I jump into that question, I do want to say too, like that was a group where, we didn't necessarily know everybody who was playing at the table. And I wonder if that character concept, if it had been in a group that it had been part of for a long time, if that issue wouldn't have arisen. And I think too, that character concept wasn't necessarily fitted to theme of the game that the GM wanted to run. And he gamely said yes and tried, but it, so
Yeah, I think it would have been better for everybody if he had been like, I think he should try something else, you know? Like, but I appreciate the fact that he gave it a shot, you know?
Yep.
So,
yeah, I don't know. Strategist characters, which I've tried a couple times, different variations of in Exalted. I think sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Like for some reason, if you give me a god level power game, the like Exalted, the Godbound game being the one notable exception, where I was bound to the words of death in the sea. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, I tend to want to make really smart guys that like manipulate things from the shadows, and like you have the power of a demigod, but like I basically want to play Zhuge Liang from the, you know, Romance of the Three Kingdoms game, the hidden dragon all the time. Be like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll just stay back here and stroke my beard, but really I planned this out 10 moves ago. And that's actually hard to do in a way that gives opportunities for the other players to be more like, we played this one game and I made some variation of that in an Exalted game, and we played it for a while, and there's this whole thing, and my character was a king, and there was this force attacking the kingdom, and I'm asking the other players for help, and that game kind of dissolved, and one of the players said, like, Jesse, I feel like I'm just like a subsection on your character sheet. Fair. Fair.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that, yeah,
Yeah.
that campaign went up in dust. um
What do you think are like the trademark too challenging characters? Like, is it like the evil character? Because a lot of groups have a rule of no evil characters, and I think they have it for, you know, a very good reason, because I don't think people, you know, I personally believe that the vast majority of all human beings are good at their core, and I think that's why it's very difficult for us to play evil characters in role playing games, and I think it's also what is so compelling about playing games like Grand Theft Auto, or being into like true crime podcasts, or being interested in serial killers, or the way our ancestors were obsessed with like the gladiator arenas, or like a pit fighting or whatever, is I think that like as a society we've gotten more good. I'm a very positive person in this regard. I think society is on a very positive track, even though we have horrible, terrible things in our world that need to be solved and are not being addressed quick enough. And I don't want to marginalize anybody's pain or experience, but I think that we have an obsession with our darker nature of the human race. And I think that that doesn't work in a role playing game. Would you say that that's kind of like the quintessential too challenging of a character for your typical gaming group?
um One of the things, yeah, I think, and where that comes to is just like the table contract of like, people don't, how to, agency and consent. I know how, oh, it's a John T. Mantis episode and Jesse said agency. um Evil gets played as selfish a lot.
Mm-hmm.
um and I think extreme selfishness is a fair, good definition for evil. My needs matter more than anyone else's, even the people I care about. And so I'm going to do things that really cause harm in order
Mm-hmm.
to get those needs met. That's extreme selfishness,
Mm-hmm.
like at its root. That doesn't work when you have a party-based game.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the number one reason why my brother does not like playing role playing games, is because he usually plays in a group where, you know, somebody's stealing treasure and is saying it in front of the players, but their characters don't know about it, or everybody's rushing into the fight and somebody flame strikes and hits everybody, and it's just like, meh, I don't care. You know, and it just kind of breaks that collective spirit for him, where, you know, that really bothers him. It doesn't bother me at all. Like if you accidentally or on purpose kill my character with a flame strike, or you're stealing from the party, I think it's hilarious. But I don't want that kind of behavior. I've played in a group, or I've run a game for a group where, um, you know, people in that group were just using it as a way to do chaotic, devious shit that they thought, you know, would you know, show everybody like how dark they were inside. It was all a big act, and it was like it was embarrassing. I was embarrassed for the person, because it was super disruptive for disruption's sake. If the person wasn't playing a character, the person was just being an asshole. You know,
Yeah.
it would be the equivalent of like, because gaming is a social contract. It's an activity that we all decided to participate in, and I think that should come with some ground rules. And that's why I like a session zero. And I equated this person's behavior in that game to be the equivalent of like if we were like, hey, let's all go out for ice cream, and everyone's like, yeah, let's go get ice cream, and then we get to the place, we all got our ice cream and our ice cream cones, and then this person just starts whacking them out of people's hands and starts laughing. It's like you're just doing it just to be an asshole. Like you're not playing an evil character, you're just being yourself. You're just being a piece of shit.
Yeah. So when I was a teacher, I used to have this essay that we did in our master's class, which was for non-native English speakers. I was, teaching basically people who are going to go to university here, English so they could be successful in university here. And we read this essay by Stephen King called Why We Watch Horror Movies. And I taught this thing so much that it's kind of stuck with me because I've read it probably like, it's a 3-page essay, like 30 or 40 times. And his basic thesis is like, we all have these anti-civilization lizard brain feelings in us. And people watch horror movies to sort of open the trapdoor and feed that gator that's swimming down in the dark in a safe way. Because if the gators don't get fed, they break out and get hungry. And I think, I think that playing an evil character can do that, or doing evil acts in a game. But when you're doing it, like at the expense of the fun of the other very real human beings, that's not. I don't necessarily think it's challenging to play an evil character because you just do fucked up shit, but you care about the people that you're with, so you don't do it to them.
Yeah. I think that's where the challenge comes in playing an evil character. If anybody does listen to this podcast, I would say the next time your group gets the idea to play evil characters, consider playing an evil character who will not screw over the party. And the reason why is they need these people. They need everyone to get along. Like, think of a sociopath. Think of somebody who's using people's personalities and what drives them in order to help them achieve their own goals, right? So I look at that as like the ultimate evil, in a sense of, you could have this, like, I guess that's more lawful evil than chaotic evil in an D&D alignment sense. But like, if you're playing an evil character, my challenge to you would be like, be almost like a very good person as far as that party's concerned. You're super loyal. There's nothing you wouldn't do with them. You're there for them in every way. You don't steal from them. You don't betray them. And the simple reason is you guys go into dungeons together. You guys do dangerous stuff, and you need them to trust you and the same while you're doing your nefarious shit in other parts of this world. So I think that's the more challenging character when it comes to an evil character, is playing it again, like we said in the beginning, with some nuance.
Yeah. And if you're not, like, to me, what makes that a challenging character? Are you used to doing that? Is that fun for you? Then,
right.
Well, then that's not actually a challenge.
Right.
And again, nothing wrong with that. But
right.
So
yeah.
I think if you want to play against type for yourself, if you want to stretch, if you want to see what you can do as a role player, that's when you lean into a challenging character. And you do the thing that gives up some of your control over your story. You do the thing that is a stretch for you. You do the thing that is counter to your most obvious strength as a player of the game, if you're talking about player knowledge. I think playing a kid would be a real challenge for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I did it actually once in Part-Time Gods, which is a sort of urban fantasy, little fragments of divinity come down through bloodlines or something. And so you are basically an incarnation of this god. Scion from the Onyx Path is a very similar game. And in that game, like, the secret lineage of my bloodline was that it was basically like Odin. So I was like a god of secrets, but I was also like a 13-year-old kid in private school that like really liked video games and, and knew everyone's secrets and would destroy, because there was this like grim Odin Norse vengeance aspect to him, but he was also a 13-year-old kid that wanted to be considered a good kid.
Right.
That was a real challenge because we all had to have meetings and all the other PCs were adults. So like our pantheon would have to get together, and I'd be like there, like, playing my Nintendo DS. Like,
Mm-hmm. That's hilarious. It's
yeah,
very American Gods-esque.
yeah. It had a
Yeah.
real.
That is it. Yeah, that would be great. I always wondered what it would be like to play like an American Gods. I mean, maybe you could do that with Godbound, right? To play in the American Gods universe, um,
Oh
and
yeah.
then to use the Godbound rules for that or another system, like not something as anime crazy as Exalted, but something with some where your character has some real power to it, but there are greater consequences at stake, like the compelling part of that world being like losing worshippers and whatnot and becoming irrelevant. But I don't want to go into Neil Gaiman's writing. I think that could be like a bonus podcast.
Yeah. Well, I will say there's a game for that. It's called
Oh,
Scion,
there you
uh,
go.
by Onyx Path Studios. I think they own it. They bought it when White Wolf went to Paradox or whatever. But yeah, it has 3 tiers. Like, you start as like a demigod who's just gotten your power, and then as you keep playing in the campaign, you ascend in power and blah blah blah, and you are related to a pantheon of gods. I played a campaign of that once, actually, where I played what is a roustabout? Is that like oil worker
Hmm.
down in the Gulf,
Oh
who was
wow.
who's
Okay.
also like a barge salesman who was like descended from Sobek, the crocodile god of Egypt. Like, and it basically wound up he was kind of Popeye the Sailor Man, and I did a horrific Cajun accent the whole time, and
Oh, that's wonderful.
yeah, it was a good time.
I think what comes to mind for me as a realistic, challenging character instead of playing the Frankenstein-esque monstrosity from Godbound, which was my eyes were way too big in that context. But I think the ultimate challenge for me at the moment is my 5e character. And I know we started this podcast by saying like we weren't interested in talking about our characters as the typical nerd conversation, and yet here we are. But in that context, my current 5e character, I'm trying to play a lawful good character who worships an evil deity. And I've been trying to, stick to what I think are the fundamentals of lawful good and how that would work in that context. Like, he worships a god of suffering and subjugation. He feels compelled to worship this god because of his tragic backstory, and feels that he has to like fulfill a penance for the terrible things that have happened because of his backstory. And he views this god as having its eye on different people at any one time to make them suffer. And if he can take that suffering away from them or alleviate that suffering by exposing it and getting them to reveal it or talk about it, then he can help them avoid the future ire of this deity. So, you know, that's the challenge I'm putting forth to myself, to
I
try to stay
I
in that context.
I do want to say, as someone that plays at the same, this is the same game with Berdine Cleargain. They're friends, I guess. That that information about the character being lawful good was revealed to me just before we started recording this podcast, and I was like, oh, you son of a bitch! Like, it's really, like, you're really well done.
Thank you.
Like,
Okay. So
you
it's
would
working.
never, like, if you're at the table, you would not for a second think this guy is lawful good, and then you hear the explanation, like, oh, he's totally lawful good. Like, which to me is how you should play alignment, like,
Hmm.
if you can. Like,
Well, you called him out for what he was when I first introduced him into the group. You called him a sin eater, which I was like, man, damn it, I should have written that into his character backstory as like an official title or whatever, because the term is perfect, and for some reason I completely blanked on it. But yeah, that's basically what he is. You
so
know.
there's a quirk too about this character that hearing the explanation, like, oh, made sense, is he enjoys causing minor suffering, very
Hmm.
annoyance level minor suffering, or not enjoys, he feels
Obligated
driven.
to.
to
Yeah.
cause minor suffering to other people. And hearing that story, I'm realizing, oh, the thing he's doing with this character is like, if this is the suffering they get, they don't get the bigger one.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, like
Yeah.
that is a cool challenge. And doing it in a way where it's not just like it is very funny, but doing it in a way where it's not just funny and doesn't just like you do it in a very respectful way of other people's play experiences. And it's
Right.
really a really a pleasure to have that challenging character at the table.
Yeah. Like I'm really worried about it getting old fast, and become the second part being too much comedy, and three, I'm worried about it crossing over into non-lawful good territory. So that's what I'm trying to, like, I'll have him, like we're at the inn, the innkeeper comes over, what do we have to drink? We have grog, and my character's like, well, I'll buy the first round for everybody, here's a copper for it, and here's another copper so that you'll, and he tells the barkeep to spit in it in front of everybody. And then he acts like this is totally normal, and they haven't lived until they've drinking, this grog with somebody spitting in it, because he is trying to do exactly what Jesse described, is trying to put them through minor amounts of discomfort in order to avoid the worst that his deity has to offer. So yeah, I'm trying to skirt that line of, is this too much? Is it annoying? Is it just played for laughs, or is there like an actual point to it?
That got me thinking. One of the things that I've never done, and as you know, I do find myself playing in more long form campaigns in ones that have an alignment system, is deliberately playing an alignment change.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. That, talk about a challenge.
Yeah. Like what happens, like if you're lawful, what happens that utterly disillusions you with the idea of law and order. Be
Mm-hmm.
like, it'd be like for me when I went to China, like I think I left lawful neutral, and I came back like just chaotic neutral. Like nothing
Mm-hmm.
matters. There's no relationship between cause and effect. Things just happen now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. That would be fun
Mm-hmm.
um as a challenge to do it in a way that, had meaningful character stakes rather than just one day you wake up and like, I think I'm more lawful evil now than I am
Yeah.
lawful neutral. I don't know.
Yeah. I kind
Oh
of,
God, that's a challenge. Lawful neutral. I've never played a lawful neutral
lawful
character.
neutral is exceptionally difficult.
What do
Yeah.
you care about? The rules.
Yeah. That's it.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Because it's like, at least with lawful good and lawful evil, it's like they're like, well, they subscribe to a set of laws for their personal code, and then if you're lawful good, you do your best to exist within the system that you're in. And I consider myself to be a lawfully good person in normal life, in that I want to do things, I want to play by the rules, because I know that if I don't, I'm putting somebody else through potential pain or making their life more difficult. So I get super anxious around, like when I was a kid, if when we went out or whatever, if we go to a restaurant and people were like fucking around and knocking things over and stuff, like I would get super anxious about it, because all I could think about was the people that work here now have to clean all that up before they go home. Like we're creating extra work for them. And so like that has manifested into me as an adult. I consider myself to be a lawful good person. Not that I think that the law is absolute. It's just that, like, look, we all live in this society that is governed by laws. And when we bend or break those laws, then we potentially cause harm to other people who are trapped within that system. And the good thing we can do is to try to think about how this affects other people before we do things. And I think if we had, and my own personal code is, if more people thought before they acted in that capacity, we might be in a better place in society. I'm all for changing the rules if they don't work. But we do have to subscribe to a system in which they exist. And so when people act chaotically, I'm not a person who always does the speed limit, but I mostly always do the speed limit. You know what I mean? But I have my moments. It's not like I'm not a creature of chaos. Like, I don't want to cause other people pain and suffering because they have to deal with the fact that I'm breaking the rules in society. I don't like, stuff like that. So, um, wow, I did not expect to get into a personal alignment discussion. I feel like we've broken every rule we set out not to do with this podcast.
I know. It's great.
So,
Um,
oh, go ahead.
I
Go ahead.
think another thing too, if you're making a challenging character, like I think playing alignments that are against your alignment type uh can be a challenge if you want alignment to matter. And
Mhm.
that's an entirely different conversation. I know
Yeah, maybe
every
that's a
D&D
future
game may have it. People might
episode.
write something on it, and then you ask them like, "Hey, what's your alignment?" Like, I don't know. Let me look at my character sheet. Oh
Yeah.
shit. Oh, okay. I guess yeah, I'm chaotic neutral. I
Hmm.
know you can't sleep with my sister. That'll
Aha. That's a
um
grognard callback.
yeah, it is. I forget which edition it was. For those of you who don't know, there was like a thing in the alignment section of some D&D book, I think, that was just like, no one ever asks someone else what their alignment is. That would be like asking if you could sleep with their sister. And like, so which it boggles my mind that in that fantasy world, there's people walking around within their head, they're like, I am lawful good.
Hmm.
Like, that is my alignment, and I know it, and I describe it. But I guess, thanks to social media, we do the same thing. Um,
Yeah.
I'm trying. There was a whole system uh, that they didn't have alignment in White Wolf games, which was probably a really good decision. um, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was called, but they did this thing. There's a sample character sheet. Um, no, no, that's not it. No, I don't want PDF filler. It's like a deme and your outwardly facing personality archetype, and then your real personality type.
Hmm.
That I thought was just nature and demeanor. That's what it was called. It's been a
Gotcha.
minute. So one of the things like that could be really challenging in that going with mechanics, um, or at least making a note to yourself to lean into it, is to have a nature and demeanor that are entirely opposite. And that's what I was thinking when you're talking about you consider yourself lawful good. I would phrase that as my demeanor is conformist. I
Mm.
follow the rules. The rules matter. My nature is deviant. None of
Hmm.
this matters.
Hmm.
Right. But there's what I present to the world for whatever reason. And then there's who I really am.
Hmm.
Um, or who I think I am, but I think having that as a slider on a character sheet is a way that if you want a challenge, you could go for. Do you have any RP opportunities that you're excited about in the near future where you have a challenging character planned?
You mean outside of that 5e character?
Yeah, I mean, well, I
I'm
mean,
playing a very non-challenging character in our other game, the one that you're running, Soulbound. Which is we should probably make another episode about Soulbound alone because I'm utterly enchanted with that system, and so maybe that qualifies because I tried to play the most simplistic, straightforward, archetypal Soulbound character I thought would they were presenting to me because I was like I want to do um when I started playing D&D with that group of theater kids, they had a rule that if you were new to D&D and new to their group, you had to play a fighter. There was no if, ands, or buts about it. You didn't have to keep playing a fighter, but for the first story arc that you were involved in, your character had to be a fighter. And the reason why they decided that is because this was second edition, I believe, is because fighter was the most straightforward, uncomplicated character that the game offered, in their opinion. Going back to what we originally discussed, the human fighter. Now, you didn't have to be a human fighter, but they that was the benchmark for if you're new to role playing games, new to D&D, so to speak. It being the generic insert for role playing game that we have in our culture. You have to play this straightforward character. So I wanted to get the soulbound experience and try to replicate that fashion. So I wanted to come in at what I thought was the ground level and play the most simple, straightforward thing, which was a Stormcast Eternal. What are they called? Night Inquisitors, uh,
Questor.
Questor. Yeah. And I'm like, this seems like you look at the picture on the front cover of this book, and that's this character. Like that's what I wanted to go for. And what is the most simple, straightforward version of this character so that I can get a gist for the setting, the archetype, what a Stormcast Eternal is, and then start working outward from that. So that is my current role RP challenge, is to come in at the basic benchmark and then try to figure out how to expand out from there. Like what more does a Stormcast Eternal have to offer now that I've done the basic ground level version of it? I can only go up. So maybe that's the answer.
Yeah.
What about for you?
Well, I love that too, because the Stormcast Eternal, that there is that inherent grief of you've already died. Like you died as a great hero to your people or in a moment of great heroism, and you've probably died again since then. And each time they remake you as a tool of war, you become less human and less yourself, and you just have these memory gaps. And it's actually not simple; it's horrific. But yeah, then and I love every second of it. For me, we have a session 0 coming up for Dune Adventures in the Imperium.
Oh wow.
From Modifius, and I am super psyched because I'm a big a Dune head. I love Dune. Everyone else in the group loves Dune.
Nice.
We are super psyched to go, but I almost never do cross-gender characters, and I think I'm going to try and play a Bene Gesserit.
Wow, that's awesome.
Because everyone's like, I want to be a sword master. I want to be a mentat. So I want to be a human computer sword master. And I'm like, I think I'm just going to be the space nun with the eugenics program.
Yeah.
I think like
that's brilliant. So why do you almost never play cross-gender characters then?
I don't feel that I know how to speak authentically in a woman's voice. I can speak authentically in an idiot's voice.
Sure.
I can speak authentically in a blowhard's voice, but like, I don't know. It just seems like I'd be overthinking everything I'm doing. Is like, am I doing credit to real women in a fictional game? And that may be a bit of a hang up because I don't think I'm actually going to hurt anybody, but
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I think that kind of goes, if I don't know if this connection is going to work perfectly, if at all. But I feel like one of the reasons why I can sit there and say in the real world I am lawful good, I think a big part of that is, as a straight white man, this society has been created for me. So it's very easy for me to be like, we should follow the rules and stay within societal structure. Like, because it was created for me. So of course I find a benefit in doing that, right? And I can see the opposite kind of effect of being like, I don't know if I don't know if I'm qualified or if it's right for me to take this leap and play an opposite gender character or something that I'm not in the real world. It's like, I think it was Hannah Gadsby, the comedian, who made this comment, and I hope I'm not mangling it, but like, I used to be a person who put women on a pedestal, in that like men were absolute garbage and women were not. Women are not capable of the terrible things that men do. And although I think that men have the gold standard on horrible shit in our world, Hannah Gadsby's argument was like, if you deify women or put them on a platform like that, then you are essentially saying that they're not human because they're not capable of doing things wrong. And I think the same thing can be said for taking that leap and trying to play that other character. Obviously, I don't want people to go outside their comfort zones or do something wrong. But I think that if you are considering an opposite gender character or a character that's not the same skin color or sexual orientation, like, just do it from a good place. And don't be afraid to take that lunge, because then what you're essentially saying is, and maybe I'm making too much out of this, but that's why I try to push myself to play characters that are not like me in that regard, because it's like, I don't want to marginalize anybody's experiences, but I also don't want to I also don't want to put that part of humanity in a box and then, lock it up with a key and say like that's not human to me. Like I want to be able to experience all aspects of humanity and learn along the way and be a better person for it. And if I play a female character, like I'm definitely going to do something, that isn't correct and not doesn't represent women as well as it should. But I'll have no opportunity to learn and get better unless I take that and make that effort. You know what I mean?
I'd
I feel
say
like that's part of the vulnerability
I'd
aspect
say
of
though
role
that
playing
counting
games.
that to learn and do better, you need that feedback. And I
Hmm.
don't know that you get that at the RPG table. Um,
I think if you play with the right people, you can. And maybe that's
yeah,
a hashtag blessed thing for me, you know?
yeah, I think I just the broader spectrum is realizing that the systems in our society were made by people who look like me for the benefit of people like me. That wasn't a shocking realization. The growing horror of all the ways that took from other people in order to justify that was, and so in that situation, I don't want to do something that is because I play in mixed groups, like I don't unlike our game, it's not all
Hmm.
like early 40s white dudes. I don't want to take up that space from somebody else,
Hmm.
and then I also don't want to be bad at it, to be honest. Like a part of it
Of
is like
course
I
not.
just don't want to be bad at it. Like that was not the challenge I was looking for, is because I would have to think like I'd have to really put the work in to try and not just lean on lazy stereotypes.
Hmm. Yeah, I should preface or attach on to what I was saying that like um I came up in a group that had multiple female players, a very diverse group of people, and I had the benefit of being able to make those mistakes in a very safe environment where, and this happened to me, like I played a female character once and I didn't do anything super terrible, but I did have one of the gamers in that group, she pulled me aside and was just like, look, basically summary like, look, I know we're all just having fun here, but what you're doing is a stereotype and it bothers me. And here's why. And like, we didn't stop being friends. And I applaud that person for having the courage to be able to step forward and have that and help me out with that. And what I will say is that the person I am today, if this is a good person, if this is a more tolerant, patient person who wants to empower other people and recognize other people and see things for what they are and be a part of the solution and not the problem, it's because of that gaming group. That gaming group is a huge part of that. Like when I always knew that women were and girls were excluded from our hobby for a long time, but when I was faced with it later in life, I was like, this is so stupid. I had such a weird benefit of being one of the rare groups that had female players in it, and then that was fine, and like it wasn't a problem. Like so when I ran into groups that were toxic towards female gamers, I was like, why are you doing this? This doesn't make any sense. Like you're like, back then gaming and nerd culture was like the underbelly of society. And I was like, we have these stereotypes because you're pushing women away from our hobby when we should be embracing them and bringing them in and giving them agency and equality. So
Yeah,
like,
there's nothing gained by just being a boys club.
right.
Like, oh, we can fart in front of each other and have a good chuckle about it. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, just make better women friends. Um, and then you
Yeah.
could still do that. So yeah, I don't know. I think that is the thing that we missed at the beginning of this discussion. So listeners,
Mhm.
thank you for sticking around. Why would you want to play a challenging character? Because you can grow
Mm.
um, from role playing. You can feed that anti-civilization aspect of yourself while not hurting the other people you play with.
Mhm.
You can stretch into new places. You can get feedback about your views of the world. You can learn. You can try to be somebody else in a way that may not always be comfortable, but that's where growth comes from.
Mhm.
And if you want to, that's the real, I think, hashtag grind set hustle. So I think, to me, that's where I come to the conclusion is like, you make a challenging character because you want to stretch and grow at the table. You want to get a little bit of personal growth out of your hobby. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. No one's required to. But hey, if you've been doing it for a while, you might start to look for other things to get out of it, for like I did,
Yeah. And I would say, if you do want to play, if you're in a group and you want to challenge yourself in the ways that Jesse and I have described so far, just put it out there to your group. If you typically don't play female characters or whatever the case may be, put it out there. Say like, look, I want to do this. Here's the reasons why I want to do it. I'm trying to come from a good place to do this. If this bothers anyone, if the idea of this even bothers anyone, please let me know, and I won't do it. I won't do it. Like, or you could say something like, if I cross a line, please let me know. Because my goal in this is not to be offensive. My goal in this is to challenge myself and my perceptions of, what what exploring this character is like and what that means to me. D&D and role-playing games are so creative. We shouldn't be restricting ourselves. That's one of the things I love about the younger generation, and the way that they've picked up role-playing games. What I've observed in them and their ability to take certain things that we would consider exploring when we were that age, those like high benchmarks, that's that's what they're dealing with all the time. And you know what I mean? And I'm not saying they have it easy. I'm just saying, like, I admire their access at this point. Like, I'm a huge fan of it. I love the way that the younger generation is picking up role-playing games and what they're doing with it. Like, I find it to be exceptionally inspiring. Like, it brings a smile to my face. And I'm even a bit jealous and wish we had it this way when you and I were that age. But I'm glad we were able to get to this point. So, I'm glad we can get to a point where we have multiple different kinds of people at the table instead of this being, what it's been in the past. So definitely just get the group consent for it. Just be like, I want to try this. I might make a mistake. If I do, please, let's have a conversation about it. D&D and role-playing games is about vulnerability. So
yeah. And with that in mind, if you find yourself coming up with an idea for your character and saying, oh, they're going to freak when I do this, rethink it. If you're excited about a negative or reaction because what you're planning for your character story is deeply transgressive, and you're like, oh, they're gonna squirm. Yeah, that's not why you do it. Don't do it. Don't do it to make other people uncomfortable. That's not growth as a human being. That's just being an asshole.
And here's the other thing. I want to add too, is if you're just showing up to your table to roll dice and kill monsters and have jokes and have fun, and there are elements of the group of the party that are looking for backstory, just let your GM know. Just let them know. Be like, what is your backstory? Just be like, I'm Batman. That's it. You're like, look, dude, I'm just here to roll dice and have fun. Like, you don't need to focus the RP spotlight on me. Like, I'm just here to have fun with everybody. Like, that, because that's totally acceptable too. Like we've been saying over and over again, you don't have to be a challenging character. Just make it known that that's what you're out to do, so that the the game master can put that spotlight on other people who want it. You think that's fair?
Truth.
Okay. Do we have any other things to say about challenging characters?
No, I think we've talked a lot about the concept, why you'd want to do it, benefits that you can have, what makes something a challenging character. I think there's not a lot of board left to tread.
All right.
So thank you so much for listening to the Jaunty Mantis. I'm Jesse.
I'm Matt, or Maddie, or Hugh, or whatever. And Jesse, if anybody has any questions about challenging characters or anything else we've talked about in the podcast so far, where can they find you on the internet?
I am at Jingoist Fett. Don't be confused by my title as the inevitable heat death of the metaverse. The podcast is at Jaunty Mantis on Twitter. I don't know how Instagram works. I'm old. Yeah, that's where you can find me. Perfect.
All right.
We'll go play some fucking games or something. I guess.
That's our sign off, right?
Yeah.
So get out there and play fucking games.
Roll some fucking dice.
You know
I
what?
guess.
Hey, get out there and play a challenging character or don't.